So we know that Boris and co and his rest of his current, shall we say, people who are in charge of the Tory party are the free market fundamentalists of the in charge, and especially the people behind Britannia Unchained. And we've talked at length before just how bad these people really are. However, it must be said that is not only who the Tory party is made up of. The whole Brexit saga, I suppose, really just comes to the point of just a small group of 62 MPs who held up Theresa May for years, who could have easily got Brexit done and indeed voted for the same withdrawal agreement that they had voted against for so many times and delayed their precious Brexit that they all seem to now love so much and yet hated all but a year ago. Kind of bizarre. But we saw essentially when Boris took power and that particular election cycle of 2019, the moderates and anyone who was not fully committed to Brexit being purged from the party. Now this has left, in a sense, the parliamentary party and the actual Conservative Party itself in a bit of a bizarre situation, because the parliamentary party, which is everyone in Parliament, all the MPs, are now pretty much the free market fundamentalists are in control of that, as we've said. But the Tory party that's outside is not necessarily theirs to control. And we have seen that of all people, the only Conservative who seems to be holding Boris Johnson to account is Theresa May. And Theresa May, you say what you want to her about, her time as PM. Yes, she was awful and terrible, but she didn't have the backing of her party at all, because this was the time when the free market fundamentalists were trying to push for power. And yes, Theresa May is ultimately, at the end of the day, someone who is definitely on the right, but she's not as far right as the current people in charge of the parliamentary party are now. And that does leave a lot of people in the same and similar position of wanting to support British businesses, and British businesses themselves being in a position where they want to support these type of Tories that Theresa May is, who know and who recognise that leaving the EU would intricately damage British businesses in a very permanent way, wanted to try and somewhat lessen that blow as much as they possibly could. And as a result, that's not what the free market fundamentalists want. As far as they were concerned, any British business that can't survive Brexit doesn't deserve to succeed, doesn't deserve to continue on, because as far as they are concerned, the market is all. And to that point, to what we're going to get into now, Boris's Brexit bill is about to come due in a very brutal fashion. So, before we get into today's article, please do remember to hit that like and share button, and of course down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link, and thank you very much to those people who do support me. So, this comes from The Guardian, and the title is, "The bill for Boris Johnson's Brexit is coming, and it is punishingly steep." You would have to possess a heart of stone not to weep with laughter at some of those who are now suddenly complaining about Brexit. It's a bit late for Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party, those lusty sponsors of the great experiment with the UK's prosperity, to be wailing, shall we say, that they have been betrayed. And I smiled to see Roger Daltrey, the Leave-supporting lead singer of The Who has joined the chorus of rock stars furious that the post-Brexit visa rules will ruin their prospects of touring across the Channel. Mr. Daltrey will have to sing "Won't Get Fooled Again" to himself before moving on to Boris, the Spider, and I can't explain. It is particularly rending, however, for the soul to witness the right-wing press discovering the cause that they so noisily championed is not their nirvana that they sold to their readers. They were cheering when Boris Johnson flourished the Brexit deal that he concluded on Christmas Eve and proclaimed, this is the cakeist treaty, and that the UK would be having the sweet stuff and eating it by gaining lots of shiny new benefits from being outside the EU while still enjoying the historical advantages of frictionless trade with its closest neighbours. All those acquainted with Mr. Johnson and his casual relationship with the truth will have now taken that with a juggernaut of salt. Consider the Prime Minister's specialist subject of cake. Anyone trying to take a fresh cream cake across the channel now does so at the risk of being impounded at customs because it is a dairy product. A Dutch TV report, which has since gone viral, shows border officers confiscating sandwiches from motorists arriving in the Netherlands from the UK. One driver agrees to surrender his meat in his sandwich, but pleads to be allowed to hang on to the bread. The frontier guard responds, "No, everything will be confiscated. Welcome to Brexit, sir." And of course, we've all seen the right-wing reaction to that. Comedic tales of travellers being deprived of their snacks are the funniest side of an otherwise deadly serious story. The bill for Mr. Johnson's Brexit is coming in, and that bill is a punishingly steep one. Why? I don't know if they're going to mention it here, but as you probably saw, a lot of firms were stockpiling for Brexit, and now they're at the point where those stockpiles are starting to look a bit thin, and new problems will suddenly arise. It is being paid by the fishing fleets in Scotland and the West Country that are tied up because they are unable to export their catch. It is being paid in a slump, shall we say, in activity at the Welsh ports because the trade they used to handle is being diverted to France and Spain. It is being paid in billions of pounds worth of transactions disappearing from the City of London, which may not be much loved by all that many Britons, but still employs a million people. Because the deal was so threadbare for the financial sector, it is being paid in car manufacturers shutting down some production because they can't get parts across the border in time. It is being paid in tons of British meat exports rotting in European harbours. It is being paid by many UK businesses, especially the kind of smaller exporting enterprises that Tories always profess to love, which are being overwhelmed by the heavy burdens and high costs of the thin deal the Prime Minister rushed through Parliament at the turn of the year. You will recall that it is one of the Brexiteers' signature promises that departure from the EU would be a liberating moment. A buccaneering free trade Britain would flourish as a wealth of creators were unshackled from the stifling regulatory chains of Brussels. What Brexit has actually done is to impose a vast new amount of cumbersome and costly new bureaucracy on exporters and importers. British companies have been put in a chokehold of regulations, customs declarations, conformity assessments, health certifications, rule of origin certifications, VAT demands, and inflated shipping charges. While some ministers talk about reducing worker protections in the name of cutting red tape. A move for which there will be little demand from even employers. Brexit is ensuring that British businesses, instead of writhing off the snakes of Brussels, are now taking on a far deadlier serpent. But I guess Jacob Rees-Mogg, who thinks that fish unable to reach EU markets are, quote, happier knowing that they are British. And it will be a claim that will be struggling British exporters should be patriotically proud to be throttled by red, white and blue tape. And multinationals are not complaining so much because they are often wary of picking a fight with government and have resources and staff and facilities to make them able better to cope. The greatest burdens of Brexit are falling on smaller enterprises, collectively employing a lot of people who trade with Europe. As my colleague Tony Hem reports in his newspaper, they are hurting badly. The post-Brexit world is so tough for many that the government's own trade specialists are advising British entrepreneurs to relocate some of their operations out of the UK and to the EU. This has to be one of the greatest absurdities of Brexit. British companies are being told by the British government that the way to survive is to lay off British workers and transfer their jobs to folk across the Channel. Ministers like to insist that we're experiencing nothing worse than teething problems, as exporters and importers come to terms with the most radical change of the way they've had to trade with our neighbour since Margaret Thatcher pioneered the creation of the single market more than 30 years ago. For sure, snafus and bottlenecks at borders caused by faulty documentation may be smoothed out over time as companies become accustomed to dealing with so many of the new complex procedures. But a lot of these problems are not temporary rises of passage into a brave new world. These are permanent liabilities. The massive increase in border friction at the expense that of all comes with it are baked into the consequences of Mr. Johnson's Brexit. The thicket of bureaucracy imposed on companies means enduring the added cost for their business. This does not feel like teething problems to them. It is more like a root canal surgery performed without any benefit of anaesthetic. This was predictable and predicted. The result of wrenching the UK out of the single market and customs union. Think tanks, some politicians, business leaders, and some newspapers, including this one, warned about the job costing and investment scalping consequences of erecting new high barriers to trade. But this is fair to say that this issue was never front and centre of the argument that raged around Brexit. Evangelists for the new adventure tended to dismiss the impacts on companies as minute compared to the immigration levels or the meaning of sovereignty. Remainers struggle to find ways to make technical sounding issues sound better to the public. Among many voters and even many politicians, the great benefits of being inside the single market were taken for granted right up to the moment when they vanished. Some did understand that there would be a price to be paid. One of them was Boris Johnson. He knew enough about the importance of the issue to fib about it. And on Christmas Eve, when he was hailing his new agreement, shall we say, with the EU as a fantastic new chapter in our island story, he claimed that there will be no non-tariff barriers to trade. That was self-evidently untrue, even at that time when he said it. His government accepts that companies will collectively need to employ 50,000 new additional customs agents in a post-Brexit world. Industry figures suggest that less than a quarter of that number has been trained by the time Brexit left the single market. And HMRC estimates that Brexit demands British companies complete 2.5 million additional, often highly complex documents a year, with a mirroring amount of extra paperwork also being generated by the EU counterparts. This cost alone on British businesses is thought to be around 7 billion a year. If you make exporting and importing more difficult and more sluggish, at the same time as making cross-channel border transactions a great deal more costly, then it stands to reason that there will be less trade. Faced with the heavy burdens imposed by Brexit, some companies will stop exporting to the EU because they can no longer find any profit in it. Other companies will just move elements of their operation, and in some cases all of their businesses, out of the UK to inside the EU. Investments, jobs and tax revenues that would have benefited the UK will in future go to countries in the EU instead. And this is already happening. Other companies will simply find that Brexit has left them unviable. Overwhelmed by the new costs, they will go to the wall. That will be especially for those who are already struggling to survive because of the coronavirus crisis. British business lost to the European competitors. British entrepreneurs have been crushed. British jobs will be exported abroad, and welcome to the Brexit. And this is something we've talked about for years. This, lack of now being able to be so competitive in a very vast market will hurt Britain in profound ways. And we will see that in lost revenue, taxes, jobs, investment. Who's going to invest in the UK now? It's very likely Nissan have said, oh, and they gave a very, very milquetoast, and trust me, we'll get to it, milquetoast announcement. But trust me, Brexiteers and Brexit supporters who have championed at the bit and say, Nissan's staying, you said they'd leave. Well, here's the thing. In their statement, they didn't say that they wouldn't go or even reduce their operations or even, shall we say, resume their operations since this whole Brexit mess fiasco started. Ultimately, there will be job losses at that Sunderland plant. Maybe not as many as, them leaving completely, but ultimately there will be job losses. Because in their announcement, they didn't announce any job increases either. So, as always, thank you for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below there's a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link. And thank you very much to those people who do support the channel that way. And as always, we'll see you next time.